All right, Carano, I want to start today by doing something unusual, something I don't normally do. I want to defend the man in the White House, defend the 46th president. I want to defend the turnip brain, mentally compromised, incompetent buffoon in the Oval Office today. I think he was unfairly criticized yesterday. Now, granted, every day it's something new. Every day he steps in front of a microphone or just speaks publicly, it becomes incumbent upon many of us to mock and ridicule him for his latest misstep. It's amazing they let him in front of the camera. There's an interesting story from, I believe it was Politico, that said Jen Psaki and other people behind the scenes tell him not to take questions, and when he does, they cringe. They sit back there and cringe. I think we kind of knew that.
Yeah.
But yesterday, I think he was talking about what else? Climate change and weather disasters, and he said a couple of really strange things. He said they have what do you call it? Flooding or wetlands in Nevada, which is in Middle America. He said in the Midwest. Nevada has moved to the Midwest.
It's just gone west a little bit. Yeah.
He also said he wanted to get to zero emissions by 2020, which would be quite an accomplishment. I have to say. I mean, he would be go down in history if he could do that. Get to zero emissions. Every time they talk about zero emissions, I said, does he even know what that means?
I mean, we breathe. There's carbon dioxide coming out of our face.
See, Len, you don't have to get to zero emissions. As long as China and India and Africa aren't playing along, as I say all the time, what is the point of all of this? But I think we know. We'll get to it. But he also said, the one thing he said yesterday that people were mocking and laughing at was that he mentioned tornadoes, and he said, we don't call them that anymore. And immediately the question went out across social media. What is he talking about? We don't use the term tornadoes. There were weathermen and women on Twitter saying, yes, we do. Tornadoes is still what we call them. But I think he was onto something. He, as he often does, he said the quiet part out loud. Like, if you're a Democrat, you use weather, you use hurricanes, floods, blizzards, droughts. You are taught to use them, and some people are smarter than others, and some people are more articulate than others. Joe Biden is neither smart nor articulate, so he says we don't call them tornadoes anymore, and they don't. They don't. You know what they call them?
What do they call
climate change? They call it existential climate change. Extreme weather. That's the term. Extreme weather, climate change, existential threat. He knows that he is supposed to be using this storm, using this tragedy for political gain, because that's what they do. I find it disgusting, and we'll get to some of the others. But Joe Biden meant what he said, that you're not supposed to say snowstorm anymore. You're supposed to say climate emergency, climate threat. You're supposed to use it any chance you get. It's one of the most disgusting things politicians, Democrats for the most part, although Jeb Bush put out a video saying he's one of the Republicans who's really concerned about climate change. Talk about a guy who just doesn't know which way the wind blows. I'm sorry, not the wind, which way the extreme weather blows. The Republicans are laughing at you, Jeb Bush, when you say, we really concerned about climate change. No, you're not. Nobody is. That's my theory. I mean, some people are dumb enough to think that we can, pass a bill in Washington and change the weather. AOC is just dumb enough, but most people aren't that dumb. They're just using it. They're using the crisis. As always, go back to Rahm Emanuel's old slogan, never let a crisis go to waste. And Democrats, for the most part, whatever the weather is, whether it's a drought or a flood, it's extreme weather.
Too cold, too hot, it doesn't matter anymore.
Right. You have a extremely cold day in the winter or extremely hot day in the summer. It's climate change. We must do more. We must spend money. We must raise taxes. And we'll just play Biden because it's a mess. He doesn't make any sense. As always, he couldn't explain to you what emissions have to do with weather if you gave him a month, if you gave him, gave him a cheat sheet, let him and let him Google it, he couldn't explain to you, not for a second could he explain to you, the president, what emissions have to do with extreme weather. Do you think you've ever pushed him on and say, okay, you said we have to get to zero emissions because of all the extreme weather. Can you just help us out? How does that work?
he just swear at you and get really irritated.
He'd get all snippy and say, he could not do it. Most of the politicians, I mean, the dumbest people in Congress are the ones who are leading this fight. Again, AOC in the House, Ed Markey in the Senate are the ones that are just obsessed with climate change and extreme weather. They could never, ever, you could give them all the help in the world and they could never sit down and explain to you what carbon emissions have to do with rain, snow, heat, sun, floods. They just use it and they hope people are dumb enough to fall for it. Speaking of dumb enough, let's listen to our president tell you that we don't call tornadoes anymore.
Looks like a tornado. They don't call them that anymore. That hit the crops and wetlands in the middle of the country and Iowa and Nevada, and I mean it's just across the board. And,
okay, just on that alone, they don't call them tornadoes anymore, and they hit the wetlands in Nevada in the middle of the country.
Right.
I mean, that's the guy who's going to solve the climate crisis. That's the guy who promised he would solve the climate crisis. First of all, he's too old to solve the crime. Not that it matters, but it would take decades if you really believed we could change the weather with public policy in DC, which we can't, but we'll get to that. But this is the guy out front explaining to the country, explaining to the voters why we have to, spend more money on infrastructure because tornadoes, which we don't call them anymore, are affecting, what do you say, the wetlands in Nevada in the middle of the country.
Yes.
Can you, I mean, that's a 30-second
I've
clip.
been in Nevada.
I've been in Nevada too.
There's a lot of desert.
There's a lot of,
there's some mountains.
There's no wetlands, like there's none. I mean, and you know what it's really close to?
What is it?
The West Coast.
Yes.
It's like out by the West Coast. It's not in the middle of the country.
I've driven from LA to Vegas.
I have too.
It's about a 3-hour drive.
It's uphill the whole way. And I did it in a rental car, and by the time we made it back to LA, the engine seized because we had like 4 fat guys in the car, and it was this little Ford Tempo rental car, and we drove to Vegas and then back to LA. And as soon as we got to LA, the smoke just came out of the engine. We brought it back to Avis and said, "Sorry, didn't mean it." Anyway, in that 130-second clip, the president of the United States says 4 things that are so stupid. How could anyone listen to? We did this yesterday about lies, right?
Yeah.
When a politician lies to you, as Biden often does, as many of them do, how do you believe him the next day when he says something? I mean, isn't the credibility just gone? In this case, when you hear something this dumb, how could you ever listen to his solution to the climate crisis and take it seriously? Can you explain to me how anyone could listen to that guy talk about how he and the fellow politicians in DC are going to solve the weather? It's just so bizarre to me. It upsets me, I admit it, but it's so bizarre to me that people take this nonsense seriously. AOC is a dummy. If you hear her talk, if you read her tweets, you know it. And she thinks she's smart enough. She thinks there's things the politicians, the House, the Senate, the president, that can do. There are bills they can pass which will change the weather, and you won't have tornadoes or you won't have hurricanes. By the way, we had just as many hurricanes 100 years ago as we do now. It's nonsense to think the weather's more extreme. And by the way, the death toll is much lower now.
Well, yeah, we have safety precautions in place. I mean, we have homes that can withstand it, buildings that can withstand it. We're much better.
We also know when it's coming,
right?
Yes, we know when it's coming, and everybody has got TVs and computers, and they know and they prepare. 100 years ago, when a tornado, I think we used to still call them that in the old days, a tornado was coming, you didn't know. You didn't know when a big hurricane was going to hit New Orleans, and you didn't evacuate. So you died. Now, but I do want to get to the death toll because I want to set this up, and I want to ask. And I know I say this all the time. I feel like we have more people who listen to us, who follow me, who don't agree with me, who maybe they hate me or they.
What
hate,
percentage of the population of listeners do you think
I'd
that
say
is?
that's 14.7%.
Okay, that's very high.
Yeah, it's thousands of people. So I like that. I feel like I could, find someone to debate me on this, and I would love it, because I don't get how we don't, across the board, mock and ridicule and disrespect and show great disdain for politicians who are so despicable and so cynical that they will use human tragedy at every turn to advance their agenda, and especially if their agenda is a bunch of nonsense just to get people to get us to spend more money. But during this hurricane, you saw it in New Orleans, and then you saw it in the Northeast. You saw it in New York, New Jersey, Pennsylvania.
Yeah.
I just looked up the death toll. It has exceeded 60 from Hurricane Ida. Obviously, New Orleans was hit hard. Obviously, there's a lot of people lost power. The death toll rose past 60. I believe this was yesterday. And in New Orleans, which is pretty amazing, Louisiana, this is a good example of why things are different now. The death toll in New Orleans and Louisiana was 13 after a Category 4 hurricane hits land and destroys a bunch of houses and a bunch of businesses and buildings and boats. These people were ready, so that only 13 people died. I want to move on to New York, which had 17. New York had 17 deaths, right?
Yeah.
The politicians gathered outside in New York to talk about it, which, that's what they do. Chuck Schumer was there, Congressman, whatever, Greg Meeks was there, a few other local politicians in New York City. It was a warm summer day. How many days ago was this?
3 days ago.
3 days ago.
Oh, I'm sorry, September 2nd. Apologies.
So it's
About a week
6 days ago. Chuck Schumer's there with his golf shirt on, and he's at the podium, and he's ranting. And I want you to listen to Chuck Schumer and consider this. The people who died in New York, his constituents who died in this hurricane, they aren't buried yet. Maybe they aren't even found yet. Do you know how many people died in the Northeast from Ida? They drown. You know where they drown? In their homes, basement apartments, first floor, or in their cars, because the floodwaters rose so rapidly. It was a pretty miserable, nasty way to go by any definition. These are New Yorkers. And by the way, AOC went on a rant about how it disproportionately affected lower income people, because those are the people who occupy basement apartments. If you're a wealthy New Yorker, you're up in the penthouse, right? I think that I don't know if that's been confirmed, the income level of all the victims yet. And maybe they were old, maybe they couldn't get out, maybe they were just, I don't know, handicapped. Who knows why they couldn't get out, why they were left to drown in their apartments. But these are people, Americans, New Yorkers, who suffered greatly in their final minutes. I don't know if it could have been worse. I'm sure it could have been worse if we didn't have these measures in place to get people out, to warn them, to help them out. Still, 17 of the 60 were New Yorkers who drowned for the most part. And the next day or day or two later, one of their two senators went before the cameras and said, hey, this is a good time to demand we spend $3.5 trillion for infrastructure, because some of my constituents just drown. And if you spend more money next time, maybe they'll get out. It's just so grotesque and despicable that I wish even Democrats who don't hate Schumer, like I hate Schumer, like most decent people hate Schumer, should agree that this was neither the time nor the place to talk about raising taxes, spending money, going into debt to solve the climate crisis. Even if you could, even if it was real, and even if you spent that money and you could stop the flooding or decrease the flooding, even if it were real and on the level, it would be inappropriate to bring this up as they're still looking for bodies that are literally floating in their own basements. Of course, you can't do that. I mean, any a person with half a brain knows it's nonsense to think, oh, we'll pass this bill, we'll spend 3.5 trillion, and next time a hurricane comes, it won't be as bad. The wind won't be as strong. It's so silly. Well, I can't believe people actually buy this. Now, you and I have never talked about, climate change. I assume you probably knew where I came down on this.
I kind of had a feeling.
But what do you think when you hear, I know you're not a Democrat or Republican, but when you hear, for the most part, Democrats say, just spend more money, raise taxes, and we will change the weather, and there won't be as many bad storms that kill people.
If you believe that carbon dioxide, that CO2 is a huge cause of climate change, and then you believe that that's going to cause more human suffering, which I have questions on both of those ideas, even if that's the case, then the one thing that you should do first is let power plants create more nuclear power plants. Like that's the first thing that you do.
That's a great point by you, Carano. Rare, valid point. Think of this. Think of this. That's how you call the bluff of any of these climate alarmists. Any of these?
Yes, the cleanest technology we have.
You say, so you're all for, and there's a guy named Michael Schellenberger. He just wrote a book called Apocalypse Never. He's a climatologist.
Yeah.
Who an apostate, a heretic.
Yeah.
Who goes against the conventional wisdom and the panic. And he's good. You can follow him on Twitter and read his book. And that's one of his things, saying it's the cleanest. It doesn't create any emissions. And that's how you advance society. That's how you improve the lives of people. You build new plants, and you don't have emissions. You have clean energy. You don't have to worry about Mideast oil, going to war for oil. You call the bluff, and you guaranteed AOC or Markey, those two idiots, could never debate you or debate him on this. Say, why don't you want nukes? Well, nuclear bad. It sounds scary. Chernobyl. What about Chernobyl?
It's it's the safest. It's the safest
no question.
Form of energy production. It's caused the least amount of deaths. Actually, there's been way more accidents involving coal plants and other plants that have caused human death. Whereas nuclear, it's so far safer than anything else. It's beyond me why we allow our elected officials to stop new power plants.
It's incredible. They closed. I think they closed the last nuke plant in California.
Yeah,
fairly recently. So, and then what do you have in California? I'll play the role of Democrats and just connect everything in one fell swoop. Close the nuke plants, and then you have blackouts, and then you have wildfires, and then you have floods. Nevada's underwater now. I mean, why don't they build more nuke plants? Don't close them. Build more. It's crazy.
Yes, it's because of these stupid mandates where they say X percentage of our power has to come from sustainable resources. But
and if you're an idiot, just a climate alarmist, you say windmills. We need windmills and clean energy. Well, nuclear power is clean, you dopes. Anyway, I want to get back to this press conference because it was with Bill de Blasio and Governor Kathy Hochul. I'm not a big fan of Kathy Hochul, but it's just nice to see Governor Kathy Hochul and not Governor Andrew Cuomo. Anyway, you had all the usual vultures there picking at the bones or the flesh of the deceased who just drowned in their basements. But here's Schumer, the senior senator from New York, and a really, really influential guy, using the deaths of his own constituents to advance his crazy climate change agenda.
Woe is us if we don't recognize these changes are due to climate change. Woe is us if we don't do something about it quickly, both in building resilient infrastructure and going to clean power, whether it's in homes, in electricity, in transportation, to stop the global warming or at least reduce its awful effects on this country. I want to thank the governor for being here right on the spot. I want to thank the mayor. He's always available. Our borough president, our great congressman.
Yeah, and then he just goes in he ball washes everybody else.
He also talks about the $3.5 trillion package. He uses this moment to talk about reducing, he says eliminating global warming.
He says
eliminating global warming. Now, if there were media that cared that weren't on his team, most of the media, they're all in on stopping the climate crisis. and you said, Chuck, you're a smart guy. You've accomplished a lot. You're a senior senator. You've made a lot of money. Can you just help us out? So you build whatever. We give you the 3.5 trillion. How do you stop the rising temperature? What happens? He would just say, oh, less emissions. No emission. Well, wait a second. I think the United States is like 14% of the world. So we do it. We eliminate carbon emissions 100%. We have zero emissions, which is silly, but just say we did. And every week, I believe once a week, China builds a coal-fired power plant once a week. India, they don't care about plant. Africa, Australia, they don't even care. They're too busy beating people who get coronavirus. So you get everything you want. Can you just help us make that little leap, that little connection? Maybe I'm just too demanding. I want that answer. Okay, you say you have a solution. You build whatever into a safe, clean infrastructure. How does that make the temperature go down? Could you just help just sum it up for me, Chuck, please? Why doesn't someone ask that? Because they could never, ever answer. Two reasons. They don't want to embarrass their guy, the media, for the most part. And two, they have no idea either. They just follow this fairy tale. Like, if we just spend money, throw some money at it, the next hurricane, next summer during hurricane season, it won't rain as much. I mean, it's just bizarre. I understand that most people are stupid. Most people are they just follow along with, they put their mask on and they do everything they're told by the government. And I know that drives you nuts, but this is the best example of all, that people believe this climate science and don't ask, don't question, don't demand an explanation, an answer. They just listen to some of the dumbest people in Washington leading the charge and saying, if we don't, drive clean, if I get an electric car, we won't have as many storms. If I use a paper bag, or I bring my own bag to the grocery store, or I
hate all those arguments so much.
Or I don't use a plastic straw. I get a paper straw for my coffee, which suck, by the way. There's nothing worse than when you get a nice iced coffee and all they have are paper straws.
Yeah.
It just gets wet. And they think if they do that, somehow there's a connection along the line between that and the extreme weather and the tornadoes, or whatever you want to call them now. And if they do all those things, if they do all the things the government tells them they must do, they get a Prius and they recycle, and they not just have one bin like the next door neighbor, they have like 3 recycling bins. So really,
they're 3 times
business.
as good. Yes,
people. There are like college graduates. There are people who are like lawyers and doctors, and they say, yes, if you just recycle, pretty soon the weather won't be as extreme. Now, if you actually read that guy Michael Schellenberger, or if you followed this guy named Richard Lindzen, who's a professor at MIT, I mean, there's a few skeptics out there. There's a few realists, and they will tell you that's not going to do the trick. In my mind, it's always been this simple to me: is the U.S. could do all this virtue signaling, and we could listen to Saint Greta Thunberg and idiots like Markey and AOC. But they're not going to do it in China and Asia, in Asia and Africa and India. I mean, they're just not going to do it. They're not playing along. I mean, John Kerry could fly his private jet to Beijing 100 times.
No, those are the special people.
Right.
So they get to do these things.
Oh, he has to do that. It's what he said. I have to fly this private jet. Al Gore can use 30 times more energy than his next door neighbor. It doesn't. He's important. He has to. But it's not going to matter to the Chinese Communist Party. They're not going to say, well, gee, John Kerry flew here and he really wants us to make an effort to have more electric cars. They're going to go, get lost. We're building an economy where we want to rule the world. Why would it matter if you or I used a plastic straw if in China they're building a coal-fired power plant like right now? Right now, they're building one.
Well, there's many levels of the solutions that they're presenting not working. I mean, if you just take the paper bag example, it's a 10-to-1 weight difference between one paper bag and one plastic bag. So the shipping costs are 10 times as much. You're using way more fuel and pumping way more emissions into the atmosphere by shipping paper.
It's like you ever hear this guy that will explain to you how many things? Just say you're an average environmentalist, just someone you or I know that thinks they're a big environmentalist. when they wake up in the morning till the time they go to bed, they use like 1,000 things that are made with fossil fuels.
It's true.
You know, plastic, anything plastic. Obviously, they drive, they have their iPhone. I mean, everything they do requires fossil fuels. And then they'll sit there and think they sound smart when they say, we have to end our dependence on fossil fuels. Well, let's start with you, honey. Why do you say you get rid of that?
Before
phone?
fossil fuels, we lived in we were freezing. Like we were, especially in the Northeast, we were subject to dying in the winter. Fossil fuels has warmed our homes and made tons of products that have saved lives. We are so much better off because of fossil fuels. Now, that doesn't mean I don't think eventually we need to wean ourselves off of it to do something cleaner like nuclear. And eventually, 100 years from now, solar will maybe be the thing. But it's like saved our lives. It has made us live a shit ton longer.
Right. It's changed the quality of life.
Yeah.
You know, and by the way, the same thing happened down south when they invented air conditioning.
Right,
Suddenly,
exactly.
the industrial sectors of, you know, Florida and Georgia and Louisiana, those places didn't produce anything before AC. Everyone just sat around and sweated. Once you got AC, you could have a factory, a functioning factory. It changed everything for the better. The Industrial Revolution made everyone's lives better. I guess you blame, the schools, the education system for lying to children and telling them if their parents have a SUV, then they're killing the planet. And I love this. I don't know why everybody can't laugh in the face of every politician who says, we don't have much time. Yesterday, I think Biden said we only have a couple of years left. Was it Biden or Schumer? I've been watching these two bozos this morning
as they try to one up.
And they said, right. They tried it. We only have a couple of years left. And no one ever says a couple of years left for what?
Until total destruction. Does the Earth just like explode? What happens?
The Earth's been here, 4.5 billion years?
Yeah.
There's a great George Carlin rant. And George Carlin was in many ways, I think he was not even a liberal. He was an anarchist. He hated government, but he didn't like conservatives a whole lot either. But he has a great rant about how the planet is fine. People are fucked. And it's a whole thing about how the planet has survived everything for billions of years. And the people who come along and say, and he goes, just tears apart the environmentalist. He was way ahead of his time in every way.
Yeah, he was.
And how you think, you get some housewife and, it's some suburban soccer mom like in Wellesley, and they sit there and they say, I got to get an electric Volvo and save the planet. You say, save it from what? Save it. It's a planet. It's not going anywhere. You couldn't destroy the planet if you wanted to. You couldn't. Even if you set off every nuclear device in the world at the same time, you know what would happen? People would die. The planet would survive. It's
it would.
A planet.
Yeah, it would.
And the idea that you hear from these idiots, including our president, that if we don't do something, I think it was AOC said we had 12 years left, and like a week later, Bernie Sanders said we had 8. And you go, okay, ready. It's like an auction.
He's got 8 years left.
Yeah, right. And right, Biden said only a couple of years left.
That makes sense. It's the world to him.
I guess I understand that. But when you think about it, they don't ever fear a serious follow-up. So Bernie Sanders, obviously, the media loves him, and God, they love Greta Thunberg and AOC and all the rest of these idiots. They don't ever fear a follow-up. It's like, what happens in Senator, what happens in 8 years?
What does it look like?
Like 8 years, like it's going to be like this dystopian landscape where everything's gotten burnt up
Mad
by
Max.
the sun. The sun burns us all alive. Oh yeah, the sun will kill us all. But what about the extreme cold that you said was a result of fossil fuels? What about the storms, the snowstorm? I mean, they don't ever have to explain themselves. It's like you're just sitting, in a classroom, and they're the teacher, and the students are all morons who just buy everything you say, or they're your flock, and you're preaching to them, and they're nodding and smiling and say, yeah, we don't have much time. You see that, like those extreme groups like Extinction Rebellion, the ones who block the highways and hang from bridges, and they say, the world, the world is going to end, or Greta Thunberg, who says, you ruined my childhood. How dare you?
Your parents ruined your childhood, Greta. Sorry you were abused.
Ruined her childhood. She flies private jets, yachts. She's famous. She wins awards, gets money. Ruined her childhood. I mean, she's world famous. How did that ruin her childhood? How dare you? How dare you? We should all agree on this simple philosophy. We are not going to be governed by children. Teenage truants, high school dropouts don't set policy. They don't. I mean, hell, AOC went to college. Well, sort of. She went to BU.
She has an economics degree.
Yeah, economics.
That's
degree.
unbelievable to me. They just hand that
Greta
out.
Thunberg didn't even go to high school, and we're supposed to believe what she says about something as complicated as climate science. It's just so absurd. And this is just the latest example. And it's too bad that people don't mock and ridicule politicians who use human tragedy, who stand there on the street when, like 2 days ago, someone lost their lives drowning in their own apartment. And you have a senator who says, now's the time to spend $3.5 trillion or this will happen again. It's just so shallow and despicable. How come we all don't mock him and just...
You asked that question a little bit ago, and I wanted to answer. I think it's number one, it's because school taught us that we needed to respect politicians. And I think it's one of the most disrespectful vocations you could possibly do, personally. But that's why, like, we look at the president and we're taught kind of not to mock him. And that's changing.
It would be like, I don't know. Say there's a terrorist attack. Boom, killed 50 people at a nightclub, like Pulse nightclub, 49 people. It'd be like standing there as they're pulling the bodies out and talking about, you have to tighten the border and more strict security or gun control, which they do. Like that day, I mean, don't you have to wait a day or two before you start ranting with that utter nonsense about stopping global warming? By the way, someone forgot to tell Chucky that's not the term we use anymore. It's not global warming anymore, Chucky.
He's still using tornado.
it's not global warming. It's climate crisis and existential crisis. If we don't do something, we're all going to burn. Your children are going to burn up alive. They're going to burn alive if we don't raise your taxes and spend your money on green infrastructure. It just seems like at some point you say, enough, shut up. We're trying to make a living here, pay the bills, put our kids through college, and you're ranting about some nonsense about how if we just sign a bill, here, we type it up, write a bill, it's this way, and hand it over to the president, he signs it, and boom, the weather is going to get better. Dude, he signed that bill, and look at that. There's no rain and flooding and no existential crisis. God, I wish people were just smarter. You don't have to be as cynical as I am. Can't you just be smarter and mock and ridicule the likes of Schumer and Biden?
No, respect the office, Jerry. Respect it.
Biden, who thinks Nevada is in the Midwest and is flooded. I mean, that's the guy who's in charge of this ship who's just frightening. But all right. We're going to get to a few.
Have you had enough of Schumer for now?
I've had enough of Schumer. Why? Do you get any more?
No,
Schumer?
I know. I'm good.
I mean, or Biden. Here's what you keep in mind, Carano. Just keep this in mind. Anytime any Democrat or in some Republicans start talking about the climate crisis, I want it because it's such nonsense. It's so ridiculous. We want to mock them every chance we get. Today, I think the weather's okay, but if tomorrow another hurricane hits, I don't know, Florida, it's hurricane season.
They'll be out again.
They'll be out saying we need to pass this bill. We need to infrastructure. We need the, and it's a lie. It's just a lie. It's just an absolute flat out lie. But it's okay because it's virtuous. It's a lie where the guy's, he really wants to save the planet. So we're going to let him lie and we're going to encourage him to lie even more. And we're going to send out this addled brained commander-in-chief to talk about tornadoes. Like anybody can do something legislatively about tornadoes.
But not just that too. It's like, so say you're right, and global climate temperatures raise 3 degrees in the next 100. Can you make the argument that humans aren't better off though? I mean, there's probably more places to grow crops.
It's a great question. Think of this. You have to go through 3 levels. You have to go through accepting that global warming's happening. Then the second thing, you have to accept that what we do as a result could solve it.
Yeah.
Like, so, okay, agree. Global warming, as Schumer called it, is man-made.
Yeah.
Which is questionable. Second thing, we can do something legislatively to solve it, to stop it. And the third thing is you have to assume It's bad.
Yeah, right. We're going to
It's
be worse
bad.
off. Right.
Right.
And no one asks it at every single level. No one asks those
right.
questions.
They say, oh, it's getting warmer in, Greenland. So what? So what? Can you say for sure that that's a crisis? That if it gets warmer in Greenland, we're going to die? But whatever. It just drives me nuts every time. But you know what else drives me nuts?
Tell me.
The media, and we did this yesterday, but we're doing it again because it is just outrageous. The media is still covering, still protecting Dr. Anthony Fauci, who was on with Jim. I wasn't Jim Acosta. I said, yes, it was Jim Acosta. It was Jim Sciutto on CNN over the weekend. I believe it was Monday. I believe it was Sunday or Monday, whatever. He was on with Jim Sciutto. They asked about college football and all those crowds that are, super spreaders. And they asked about the usual stuff about masks in schools and all that. They didn't ask why he lied under oath in front of the Senate when Rand Paul asked him about financing, about subsidizing, funding the gain of function research in Wuhan. Well, The Intercept, which is a website that Glenn Greenwald founded, but then left and
had a fight with,
and was not pretty.
No.
The Intercept broke a story yesterday that proves essentially that Fauci lied. That Fauci, the NIH, funded this Peter Daszak guy, and the purpose was to do gain of function research in Wuhan, which led to the pandemic, which killed more than 600,000 Americans and what is it up to worldwide?
Millions.
I'll check. Yeah. 3.5 million. That, and I heard Tom Cotton was talking about this last night, and he said it's one of the biggest scandals of our time. I would say it's not even a close second. The U.S. government, led by Dr. Fauci, took U.S. taxpayer money, sent it to Wuhan indirectly, and the result was a virus that destroyed our economy and killed 600,000 Americans. You're going to tell me that, I don't know, Donald Trump making a phone call to Ukraine, which led to his impeachment, is worse than that? You're going to tell me that, I don't know, the break-in at the Watergate was worse than that? Because I would say no, the results, the consequences, the utter destruction that this led to makes it stand alone.
4.5 million people dead.
4.5 million people worldwide. And we don't know whether they could have created this virus without our money. I mean, think of how, when it first broke, I think Rand Paul led the charge in previous Senate hearings. The last Senate hearing is one where Fauci clearly, just unequivocally lied under oath, which I believe is a felony. I believe if that's, I don't know, if that's Roger Stone or if that's Michael Flynn, they're already in handcuffs and be taken away. They're all, and I'm not exaggerating. If that's someone on Team Trump who clearly, obviously lied under oath, they're gone. They're jailed. They're done. Fauci, for some reason, this lying fraud is protected. And I guess I understand why, because he's not on Team Trump. He's on Team Biden. He helped Biden get elected. He wants to mask everyone up. He wants to stop college football crowds from having a good time. He's on the same side as the mainstream media and the current regime, the Biden regime. He's on their team, so they will protect him. But how can anyone make the case that he didn't lie under oath, that he didn't commit perjury? It seems so obvious, so clear. Do we have the exchange? Now, keep in mind, he put his hand on the Bible and swore to tell the truth before he had this exchange with Rand Paul.
Knowing that it is a crime to lie to Congress, do you wish to retract your statement of May 11th where you claimed that the NIH never funded gain-of-function research in Wuhan?
Senator Paul, I have never lied.
His mic kicks back in.
Microphone.
Your microphone.
Senator Paul, I have never lied before the Congress, and I do not retract that statement. This paper that you are referring to was judged by qualified staff up and down the chain as not being gain of function. Let me finish.
You take an animal virus and you increase its transmissibility to humans.
Right.
You're saying that's not gain of function?
Yeah, that is correct. And Senator Paul, you do not know what you are talking about.
He is lawyering. He's lawyering. Yes, he's lying. I mean, it's clearly a lie. And the people, the judged it. This was some group led by Daszak who had wrote this letter to Lancet, the publication, medical publication, saying it wasn't gain of function. But I'm just gonna. They were compromised. They had a conflict of interest. This was not an honest assessment. It was clearly gain of function. Even an idiot like me knows it. He's lying under oath. That is a felony. If there were any justice in this, if justice were blind in this country, and as we know, after judging, January 6th insurrectionists versus, Antifa and BLM, we know this two-tier justice system. And fortunately for Fauci, he's on the side of Clapper and other good Democrats who lied under oath, Brennan, who will never, or Hunter Biden, he's on their team, so he'll never be brought to justice, but God knows he should be. God knows that is clearly perjury. It won't matter. I believe it was on CNN, but I don't think MSNBC or CNN has even mentioned it yet, that he lied under oath. They got his back. And it's disgusting.
I got to say, when this first came out around Paul, and I'm kind of a Rand Paul guy because of his dad, I was a little skeptical. Even hearing some of the testimonies, a little skeptical. But this Intercept article is really damning.
Sure.
I mean, they were looking for coronavirus in bats because they wanted to test it on mice that they infused with human DNA. Like, how you can grow ears on mice and stuff. I mean, what the hell else were they doing?
Well, if you ever want to know what ever want to understand how big a scandal it is, there's video of Fauci saying, even if this research causes a pandemic, it's worth it. It's worth it. So this evil little elf thinks it's worth it. Now that 4 point something million people are dead, 600,000 Americans are dead. It's worth it. That's the kind of monster he is, and he's just being propped up by the media, by the Democrats. They know he lied under oath. They know we funded this research, which led to the pandemic, the biggest crisis in all our lives, that destroyed trillions in our economy, that killed 600,000. That ruined business, ruined lives. And he just has no remorse. He's a monster. And I think more and more people are finding that out. All right, let me do Shea, and then I'm going to get to a few other things. We've got to get to Todd McShay, the sad story, the concerning story of Todd McShay. And the State Department's not happy with the Taliban, Carano, and I'm going to tell you why after I tell you about Shea Concrete. Let me get to a couple of quick things on the state of things in Afghanistan. Americans are still trapped. By the way, they're going to be trapped on Saturday. Joe Biden's going to go to Shanksville, Pennsylvania. He's going to go to the Pentagon, and he's going to go, I think, to Ground Zero, make the rounds on September 11th, while Americans are still trapped, being held by the people who harbored the guys who brought down the towers on September 11, 20 years ago. He thought he was going to have a nice visual, a nice, ceremonial video scene on September 11th, bragging about ending the war. He thought it was going to be a great photo op. I'm sorry, it's not going to be. You saw what happened yesterday when people were harassing him, yelling at him, and he can't take it either. He's so ornery, touchy, and snippy. He had to go ranting up. Those people don't know what they're talking about. They were yelling at him for leaving Americans behind. They know what they're talking about. It's great. And by the way, college football on Saturday and NFL on Sunday, where this new chant might take off. F Joe Biden. If that thing catches on, as I tweeted, I can't wait, because there's so many of these, limo liberals in the media. Peter King leading the charge, Ben Volen. They're not going to be able to handle it. They're going to pretend probably it isn't happening. But if it gets loud enough so everyone kind of knows it's happening, they're going to have to, I don't know what, they're going to have to circle the wagons around their guy Biden, who is going to get harassed on Saturday, I predict. But couple things about our new friends, the Taliban. They upset the Biden administration yesterday. The State Department issued a statement that they weren't happy about the new cabinet that they assembled, the new cabinet the Taliban assembled, because there were no women. It's not inclusive. said, I think it's a State Department spokesman, the new cabinet is not inclusive. Yes, a State Department spokesman said they will, we have made it clear our expectation is that the Afghan people deserve an inclusive government. They're talking about the Taliban. Who stone women for sure. They think they're going to make a woman, like head of the interior or state or secretary of state when they don't even let them go to school.
I was
They
going
don't
to say, they
let
got to
them
make
show
their
faces.
their schools inclusive first.
I'm telling you, sometimes you have to read it twice to believe that the Biden regime is serious. They're upset. And I got news for you. They're going to get even more upset today because yesterday, big story out of Kabul, they painted over a portrait of George Floyd. First of all, what the hell is there a portrait of George Floyd on a wall in Kabul for anyway? Secondly, I don't think they're going to like this in the Biden regime. When they see this and they see the Taliban is ordered to paint over they paint over everything. They don't want portraits of anyone, especially of women, but they didn't want a portrait of St. George of Fentanyl. And so they painted it over, and the Biden administration is going to make it clear. They're going to have a strongly worded statement say they don't like that. And lastly, we know the cabinet they assembled includes like 4 of the 5 guys we traded for Bo Bergdahl. 4 of the 5 is now part of the government. They're leaders in the new government, including a couple of known terrorists. Their ex-secretary of the Interior, I'm not even going to try to pronounce his name, is a wanted terrorist. The U.S. government has a $5 million bounty on his head. He's now a cabinet member.
Well, they know where to find him now.
So he's going to be on TV. He's going to be, I don't know. He's interior secretary, so I don't know if he travels abroad. But a guy who's a known terrorist, and if you kill him, you get $5 million, is now in their government. And those are our new allies. Those are the ones we're working with now, working closely with. But their colleagues in Gitmo, the trials beginning of Khalid Sheikh Mohammed and 4 others responsible for 9/11, and it's going to take years because of these crazy left-wing lawyers that volunteered to help save Khalid Sheikh Mohammed, who, by the way, admits he did it and would be willing to die. But wait, I think they've crossed the line finally, Carano. I mean, these guys obviously carried out or planned the attack on the towers and the Pentagon and killed 3,000 innocent Americans, but now they've done it. In court yesterday in Cuba, 4 of the 5 went maskless.
Oh.
All the lawyers were masked up, and one of the terrorists, that puss, wore a mask. You know what? I'm starting to think these guys, these Al-Qaeda guys, they don't care who they kill. They don't. They're heartless. I mean, they didn't wear masks in court. It's just so disrespectful. And I think that the Biden regime was really trying to work with them, really trying to get along. But now they're painting over George Floyd murals. They're not naming women to the cabinet, and they're going maskless.
Couldn't we just tape the masks to their face, though?
That's a good question, which they do.
Isn't that what we do?
Can you believe they don't make them? I guess they're terrorists. Imagine making a terrorist wear a mask in court. They probably get tested like every day, and they're probably they don't have what. Khalid Sheikh Mohammed, I don't even know if he's still fat. That'd be pretty cool if he got coronavirus and died. That would work for me. But let's get to Todd McShay, the ESPN football guy, draft guru. He's kind of it's been like Mel Kiper's sidekick. He's done a good job. We used to have him on the show occasionally. He's from Swampscott. He went to Richmond. I think he played quarterback at Richmond, but I think he does a good job. He's more famous for being Portnoy's, childhood friend. But he does sideline reporting at games. I don't see it a lot, because I don't watch a lot of college football, but when I do, he seems like he does a good job. He did a game. What game he did Saturday? He was on the broadcast with Sean McDonough, by the way, and he struggled, and he didn't look good. He looked kind of bloated and disoriented, and people started tweeting immediately saying, "What is wrong with Todd McShay?" After watching the broadcast. Now, he's done this before. last season he did a game, and that's the one you're looking at. The one from this weekend,
It's Alabama, Miami.
it's really short, but we have the one from last. It's only like a few seconds. I think they must have cut away from him.
Yeah.
But somebody at ESPN like took the bus to the game or took a car to the game with him, stayed at the hotel with him, went into meetings, and still chose to put him on the air, which is a little strange. But can we play the one from last season that's longer?
Sure.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at offensively, what they've always done, Paul Chris understands like the pre-snap motions and everything that you want to do. But when you have a quarterback like Mertz, it's different. The ability to throw the ball down the field and be decisive. That's what I love about his game.
Now, I mean, there's all kinds of theories. It's probably irresponsible to just throw them out there, but
And he looks worse, by the way, too. So the
Yes,
audio
good
doesn't
point.
necessarily give it as much justice. I mean, he's slurring his words a bit and kind of all over the place, but he's shaking
he's
and
bloated. He's
bloated.
shaking. He's looking around.
Yeah.
It's not good. Not good. And I mean, people like him. No one's rooting against him. If that's Max Kellerman, be mocking him. But McShay is taking time off. It says to take care of his health and his family. Do we think it's drugs, alcohol, disease? I mean, what do you think?
well, he's a younger guy, or is he Portnoy's
He's
age?
like
So he's
40,
like
yeah, 40,
mid 40s or something.
4, I think. You got his age in
So
that
I mean,
story.
disease could hit, but it seems more
I mean,
likely that it would be.
And he goes to rehab, I
something.
guess.
Yeah, maybe.
Hopefully, I mean, to be honest with you, that's probably the best case scenario, that he just goes, gets clean and comes back. ESPN wished him well and said he'd be taking time off. I don't know that we're going to find out. I often wonder this. I've never asked you your take on this,
Yeah.
but I know the public wants to know when a public figure, when something like this happens, or when a guy like Michael K. Williams ODs. We want to know immediately, how'd he die? Or an athlete, dies young, and you're immediately saying, is it drugs? Or is it suicide? I mean, and I often wonder if we have a right to know, I mean, these are people who've lived a public life, but you do find out cause of death when it's someone like Michael K. Williams dies, right? You do.
So if there's a police investigation, then it's going to be public records, and we'll see it. I think most families or publicists of people who are famous who've died probably feel like it's better to let the fans know what happened. So I think they'll like give out that information on purpose, but that or a police inquiry into it, I think, are the two ways. I don't think we have a right to. I just think they do it so that we can put some closure there.
So Jimmy Hayes, the hockey player,
right,
former Bruin, Boston guy, passes away on August 23rd. And it's stunning, shocking. Everyone's shocked. Everyone liked him. Everyone's tweeting wonderful things about him. Will we ever find out how he died?
I don't know. I mean, I think it's good to, like I said, give fans closure. People who love these athletes. I remember watching Jimmy Hayes play. Then, and by all accounts, everybody that has spoken about him since I've heard says he's a really nice guy. So I think fans would like that closure, but his family may want privacy.
I mean, I'm looking at. He died one day after celebrating his son's second birthday. I didn't even realize that. I mean, People magazine was writing about Jimmy Hayes, saying we're still not sure what the cause of death is because people want to know. They want to know. I mean, it's scary when someone that's 31 years old just gone like that, or Michael K. Williams is older, but when you hear he's dead, and it's upset a lot of people, huge fans of The Wire. Jason Whitlock called him the greatest character in the history of television. And I guess that's subjective, and he loves The Wire, as we know if you follow Jason Whitlock. I think that might be overstated
a little bit,
slightly. But I mean, I can't lie. I'd like to know how people, when young guys die, you like to know. Was it natural? Did he have a heart problem? I mean, what is going on here? And I don't know what I would do if I were a reporter. I mean, obviously, there's not that many, reporters, working the beat anymore. The Herald's been decimated. The Globe's a joke. It's hard. I don't know how many TV people in Boston are trying to find out. Maybe they know. Maybe people in the sports media in the hockey world know, and they just don't think it's our business. I don't know. I don't know the answer.
If it's a heart attack or something beyond his control, I think we'll know. I think if it's more seedy than that, we might not.
Well, if it's a heart attack, yeah, you should. I mean, you feel bad. He had a bad heart, but if it's a drug overdose, like we believe Michael K. Williams.
Yeah, I think.
Do I have that right?
Michael K. Williams. Yeah.
Then it's good to know, as I often point out, Len Bias. His family wanted to cover it up, understandably, or friends, or Lefty Driesell might not want to know the truth, but the truth came out. He did cocaine. It stopped his heart. He died, and it shook people up in that whole generation. It changed people's perception of cocaine. It was suddenly cocaine wasn't a recreational drug. It was something that could stop your heart and kill you. And I think, and I know his mother said this for years, and that it had a real effect. It did. Len Bias's death, and if they covered it up and just said, "Oh, he has a family problem with the heart, and what can you do? He went to bed, didn't wake up," that wouldn't have changed anyone's perception of drug.
No.
I think Len Bias's death saved, I don't know the number, hundreds, thousands, millions of people who said either, I'm not going to do cocaine ever, or I'm not going to overdo it. I'm not going to take any chances because I saw what happened to Len Bias. And it wasn't like, for some reason, it didn't have the same effect when like John Belushi did it, because you just assumed
he was a big party animal.
Yeah, he was just overdoing it and shooting,
but not like an athlete,
great athlete, young,
super fit. Yeah,
was going to be a great NBA player, and was stupid. That's what he was. I mean, he wasn't like Belushi or Chris Farley and just overdoing it every night and overweight and bloated and just. He was in great shape, and he just overdid it after getting drafted by the Celtics, and it scared a lot of people. So, I mean, sometimes I think the family, obviously they have the right to privacy and they don't have to tell anyone, but maybe if it is a story like that, and again, I don't know what Michael K. Williams' family is going to do, but there was a story that went about one town in New York. One town in New York had more people die of overdoses in one weekend than died in what was the hurricane before Ida? Henry, right?
Yeah.
More people died in one town of overdoses because they had that bad batch of fentanyl, of cocaine with fentanyl. So young people drop it dead left and right. And it's news, but it's not huge news. And, Chuck Schumer's not out. I think they were in New York. He wasn't outside the next day demanding we stop fentanyl from coming over the southern border, that we close the border because these drugs are pouring in and killing his constituents. He didn't use that death for political gain or even seem to give a damn. But the people drowning in their basements, we have to spend $3 trillion and change the weather. It doesn't get enough attention that this fentanyl is just killing people in their primes. And if you had a loved one who died and thought they were just doing a line of cocaine and snorted up some fentanyl and boom, their heart stopped, I think you would want to do some good.
Yeah.
Say, be careful.
And you can do it in a book too. I mean, he's had such a cool life and tons of experience. He's been in awesome shows, and even he was even 12 Years a Slave, highly Gone Baby Gone, like big, really important movies. So you could do a book, talk about his life, and then also talk about the tragic death.
See, I don't even know how that works. You just think it's like good cocaine or good heroin. It doesn't have any fentanyl, and the dealer sneaks it in there and it kills you.
And I don't know why you would want to do that. I don't know why. So fentanyl
isn't cheaper.
Maybe it is. Maybe that's what it is. It's because you can use less of it.
Because Biden opened up the border. It's easy to get. It's pouring over the border. We don't stop anybody. We don't care. These, unless they come over the border without a mask, then we tell them masked up. They can come in with a backpack full of fentanyl, but got to wear a mask. But people are dying, and it would be nice to know why, how to, as a warning to others. I mean, right now, if you're, do you do cocaine?
No.
Heroin?
No.
Oh, but you're a big libertarian. Don't you think we should all just do
heroin? Oh, I think they should be legalized, but I don't. I wouldn't do them.
So if someone your age or younger is thinking of doing cocaine this weekend, aren't they a little nervous now after what happened to Michael K. Williams and others? Well, I mean, aren't they saying that might have fentanyl in it? I
mean, I would always be nervous of something like that with a hard drug like that. Yeah, anyway, but yeah.
So it's not. It would be nice to know if that's how someone died, and maybe we'll find out. Maybe we won't. Back to Todd McShay. We wish him well. By all accounts, good guy, local guy. Doesn't look good, but maybe he just needs some time away. We will see. But all right, that will do it for today. Anything else, Carano?
No, I think that's it.
I almost called you Callahan again. Anything else?
Well, don't say it then. Don't admit to it.
By the way, I
Yeah.
have not complained one time in however long we've been doing this
Yeah.
about your choice of drops and sound. What you know what you did yesterday with the Kevin Cullen sound?
Yeah.
You played the one thing that that he didn't lie about.
Oh, did I?
Yes, because it sounds good. I mean, to be honest with you, I understand why. We played yesterday. We're talking about the biggest liars in the media. If you weren't listening yesterday, and we talked about Brian Williams.
Yeah.
We talked about the Rolling Stone lying about
Yes.
ivermectin. And we brought up Kevin Cullen, who is just a fabulous liar and fiction writer for the Boston Globe. And the sound, there's so much great sound of him saying, Janie Richards was his talisman, and talking about playing the tin whistle in a band in Ireland. He basically puts himself in places where he wasn't, like at the finish line of the marathon.
Yes.
The bombs went off. Oh, I could smell it. I could taste it. He said he heard the dying wails of Crystal Camp.
Yeah, right.
He said it in court or after going to court because they played them in court. So he did actually.
Oh, I apologize for that. I'm sorry, because it was from your show. That's what I figured, because that's why I clipped
there's
it.
100 other cuts which are great. I mean, if it weren't for the sound, I don't think Cullen would be nearly as funny or entertaining. The sound is amazing. He just makes stuff up to make himself look good. Oh, I forgot to eat, so I went and I got a corned beef sandwich at Foley's because they have a really good corned beef, and it's just. He just makes stuff up to make him. He thinks of himself as some kind of Hollywood version of Jimmy Breslin.
Oh yeah,
street reporter, street tough reporter. And 90% of it is fiction. He was taking a nap in Hingham when the bombs went off, and immediately said, "I have to place myself there," and went to work placing himself at the finish line. All of it a lie. All of it stolen valor. And if you haven't heard it, you Google it and listen to other. Cuts from him.
Well, I'd like to apologize to you right now and to your fans for that bad cut, and I'll try to
don't let it happen again.
I'll do my best.
All right, that will do it for today. Thank you to Carano, I guess. Thanks for everybody for listening, watching, and commenting. I'm Gerry Callahan. This is the Callahan Show. I'm sorry, you got to catch me with this. It's your idea.
How many mistakes you make?
Oh, I make a lot, but this was your move. And
it's true.
I'm trying, man. I'm trying.
You're doing great.
All right, I'll do it again. Ready?
Yes.
I'm Gerry Callahan. This is the Callahan Show with Matt Carano, and we'll do it again tomorrow.